and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man who's ready to reveal all his secrets. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. Is that what I signed up for? All my secrets.
Pretty much.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
This is a very special episode of the Total Soccer Show. It's a one-time only deal. It's essentially an AMA.
Unless we break it into two parts.
Unless we break it into two parts. It's essentially an AMA, which we did on Reddit maybe a year or so ago, where we've had so many personal questions from listeners that weren't soccer. They were just about us, that we thought, let's answer them all in one show.
All right.
Yeah. So I think it's worth noting up front, it's going to be all about us. It's a little bit self-indulgent.
It's a lot self-indulgent.
It's a lot self-indulgent. So if you're not interested in that, if you only want to hear about us talk about other soccer matches, one, totally understand.
Yep.
Two, I think now would be the best time to turn off. But three, if you've been listening for a long time and you're one of those people who's had personal questions for us, which, you know, we get sent quite a lot, this is the show where we're going to answer them all and then never speak of it again.
I somehow doubt that, but we'll see how it goes.
So we have a lot of questions in front of us. We're going to try and go through them as quickly as possible, answer as many as possible, reveal as many behind-the-scenes secrets as possible. Yeah?
Yep. So let's get going then. First question comes from John Pohl. I realize it varies as the events change throughout the year, but in a typical week, how much time do you guys spend inside the Total Soccer Show tower together?
So this would be interesting because we've never calculated it. I'd like to know how many hours you think and how many I think. I think around 30 hours in this room.
Yeah, I'd say that's about right.
Yeah?
I'd say at a minimum.
At a minimum, right? Some days it's like 3 or 4 hours by the time we've recorded and left. But then sometimes there's a crazy 10-hour day.
I think those are still pretty rare, even though. Like the 3-hour ones definitely are rare because I think even if we get in here with a kind of straightforward listener question show, we still end up talking a lot about stuff, or maybe we'll incorporate a piece of news from the day. We had scouting on the end. It ends up.
And then one of us is hungry. We have to get lunch.
Yeah.
But around 30 sounds about right. Okay, so that's one down, one question down. Next question comes from Jason Smith. What are your pre and post show routines? Do you have a pre-production meeting before each show? How do you decide what's going to be talked about on the show? And after the show, do you discuss what you liked and what you didn't like about it? So what are our pre and post production routines?
I mean, really, I think sometimes it requires like a lot of planning out if we've got like a big event, a tournament or something like that. But generally speaking, I think we kind of decide on it the night before, the day before of like, oh, there's this happening. Let's talk about that. Yeah, that makes sense.
2 words. Text messages.
Yep.
So much of the show is planned via you and me texting back and forth and making decisions that way. Yeah. Right? Yeah? That feel about right?
Yeah. And then in terms of routines, I think it's mostly just we do a lot of research on our own. Like the Monday review shows, we're watching all the games on our own, generally speaking.
But we agree what the games are going to be. Then so this is general, right? We agree what we're going to be talking about. Then we separately go and do the work. And then we come in the studio and meet. And we're both 90% ready to go.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, and then it's a matter of, like, we never, like, script any conversations. We never plan out really what we're going to say aside from, like, I've got a few things I want to talk about. And then the biggest thing, I guess, is if one of us has missed a thing, if, like, you didn't see the slide tackle or I didn't see this header, we'll go back and watch it so we know what the other one's talking about. But outside of that, there's not a lot of, like, in-office review of stuff we're going to be talking about because I'm not good at, like, rehearsing stuff because I feel like that kind of kills everything.
Right? Yeah. It's never as good as when you do it live. That's why Saturday Night Live is great.
That's why Bill O'Reilly wanted to do it live.
We do have, I'm not sure he did. We do have a sort of bullet point of rough topics that we're going to hit on, just so we both know where the show is going. Like right now, all the questions we're going to do, we have them printed out in front of us, so we all know the general direction of where we're going.
Yeah.
How about post-show? Do we talk about what went well, what didn't?
I mean, I think if it went well, we don't really talk about much.
We just high-five and walk off into the night.
Yeah, exactly. And if it didn't go well, I think usually we kind of deal with that within the episode because I think there are times when we can tell something's not quite clicking or we're not quite covering the way we want to or maybe the energy is low or whatever.
Yeah.
Rare are the occasions when we put out a show knowing it probably wasn't our best. Really, I think the only time that ever happens is when there is some sort of audio malfunction and we know the audio isn't so good, but we've spent 2 hours recording a show, so that's going to be the show we're putting out.
And I would say, I hope it's not too big of a secret to reveal. This doesn't happen often, but if something's gone really wrong, we've just done something badly or incorrectly, we'll just redo it, right? We will not put out something that's got incorrect information and we know it, or and unhelpful conversation, we'll redo it and make sure it's right before it goes out into the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, with that said, I would say this wasn't a question, but I think maybe our average, knocking on wood, there's going to be a lot of knocking on wood in this show. Our average number of edits is maybe 2 or 3 in a 45-minute show.
Yeah,
I think
that sounds right.
generally fewer than that.
Yeah. And a lot of those are for coughs or swallows or.
Yeah. Or
I need some water.
Or forgetting the promo code, something like that. Yeah.
Never happens.
Yeah.
Anything else on pre or post?
No, I mean, I think that's about it for pre and post.
Next question then. Send it at me.
All right, Robert Weber, what mics, interface, and software do you use to record?
Okay, so the mics, we actually just upgraded. We used to have the Audio-Technica USB 2100s, which were both USB and XLR cable compatible. This will all make sense to sound nerds, which I guess we have now become. But at Christian Polanco's recommendation, we recently got some new mics. I'm going to lean across the table and read yours, okay? It is the Sennheiser E835. The Sennheiser E835.
All right. Yeah, and with those, we upgraded our connections as well. And then we have, a Behringer mixer, which I would recommend getting a mixer if you're going to do a podcast.
Definitely. It gives you a lot more control over the audio. Then the Behringer mixer is plugged into what would you call that? Is that an iMac?
It's an iMac, yep.
iMac via USB.
But not the old school colorful big bulb ones.
No, the newer ones, the silver and black ones. And that is running Adobe Audition, which is where we record and edit. So that is our audio setup.
Yep. That audio setup has changed over the years. So too has the way we do the show. Shreyas Ramani asks, how has the Total Soccer Show grown and changed over time?
So we've picked up more listeners. The trend of the graph goes upwards because we started from 0, and now we're where we are. There's a specific question about that later. How has it changed over time?
I mean, numerically it's changed because we started with the 2 of us.
That's the big one.
Then we went to 4 co-hosts.
Yep.
Then we went to a rotating panel for a while, which did not include me for a while.
Yep.
And then I think around 2014 it kind of solidified as the 2 of us and has been since.
Yep. So if anyone's been listening from the very beginning, started with me and Taylor.
As the Total Football Soccer Show.
The Total Football Soccer Show. So the name's changed. That's interesting. Then I went home for Christmas and we added Alberto Totti, Josh Stankus.
Yep.
After that, Peyton Sadal, Laura Coots. After that, Ryan Hines. And then slowly people have dropped off, gone to college, done something else. Then when Taylor came back, we went back to the 2-man show. For a little while, the whole thing was over Skype.
Yep.
Yeah, it was me in Richmond and you in Falls Church, and we recorded the entire 2014 World Cup that way.
We
Remember
sure did.
That?
Oh, yeah, with me sitting in my closet because we had a family member staying with us.
Yep.
So we lost our guest bedroom/office. So, I was recording in a closet.
And then the big change was 2015. We got this studio right here. Then we could put the Behringer and the mics in here.
Yeah.
And it's the 2 of us in this office ever since, I want to say, September 2015.
Yes.
Yeah?
I think that is correct.
So those have been the biggest changes over time.
Yeah. And then in terms of the subject matter, I think we used to have it a little bit more structured because it used to be on the radio show. So we used to have the
that's a big change. We used to be on the radio.
Yeah. So we had on a local independent radio station. So no calls to action, no advertising. But we did have the segments with a segment break in there. So I think initially we were going to do 5 minutes on this and 5 minutes on that. And it's become a bit more meandering over the years.
I wouldn't say that. I'd say we've just got more detailed.
Sure. I mean, certainly when you have the time constraints, you have to be a little bit tighter in what you're talking about. So you can't spend 8 minutes waxing philosophical about some random... Yeah, exactly. You kind of got to get to the point.
All right, those were all the production questions. Are you ready for the business questions?
Sure.
I've categorized these for us. First business question comes from Sean Cleary. This was also asked by Danny Keane. Oh, here it is. How many listeners do you get? What's the most listened to show ever? And how many new listeners have you gotten in the last year? So let's start with the first one. How many listeners do we get? How many average downloads per show?
I think our media kit accurately says around 17,000.
Yep, 70,000 downloads per show.
And I think that is... I guess the best way I can explain this is that there are definitely times early on when we would say we're definitely getting 2,000 downloads when we were getting 1,300 downloads. I would say 17,000 is a low to middle estimate of what we've been getting.
Yes. There'll be a particularly unpopular show. This may be one of them where we dip beneath that. But then if it's a US national team show, it will be above that.
Yep.
But the average for a decent a show where we can expect a decent number of downloads, 17,000 is roughly where we're at. And I've come to a stage where I'm happy to say that because now I'm proud of that number. Whereas before I wasn't as comfortable letting people know how many downloads we got.
Why was that? Just because you want it to be more?
Yeah, because I always felt like we took this very seriously and we treated it very professionally, but when it wasn't as many, then I'm not as comfortable saying it, right?
Yeah.
I didn't want people judging me, basically.
Yeah. I mean, certainly we would like it to be more, but yeah, 17,000 per show.
I always want it to be more.
Yep.
What's the most listened to show ever? I'm assuming we both did this research, right?
I believe it's the Group F preview and predictions from this World Cup, which is very strange to me.
So that's Mexico, Germany, South Korea, and Sweden.
Yeah.
I've got a theory on why it was that show.
I'm going to guess Mexico.
I think partly Mexico, a lot of Mexico fans in the United States, but I think partly the timing as well, right? So there are 8 groups. H was the final group. I think that Group F preview published around the time, because we were cutting it close by the time the World Cup was starting, it published around the time where maximum interest in the World Cup, interest was at its peak. People were listening to previews, and that would have been maybe the episode that published around that time.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
The other explanation I had was that given what happened to Germany, I feel like there's also, that might have been one of the previews where people would go back and listen to it again to hear like where we were wrong or if we had any hesitation about Germany heading into the tournament.
Oh no! I hope, because I remember predicting that Germany basically looked like a machine and everyone should be scared of them.
I think we were probably along those lines. Yes.
Well.
Yeah, and then I do think Mexico was probably a big part of that because for some people that was the team they were cheering for in the World Cup, like because they had chosen Mexico. For others, they're just fans of El Tri, so that was who they were supporting. And maybe there aren't that many English language podcasts that were focused on an in-depth review of what Mexico were going to be doing, so maybe that played a part as well.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, how many have we picked up in the last year? I want to say, according to Media Kits, which we are if any advertisers are listening, we do not inflate our numbers on Media Kits. We always make sure it's an accurate number because advertisers then ask you to back it up, right? It was 13,000 before the World Cup. I want to say downloads increased to about 25,000 roughly during the World Cup, and then it's down to about 17. So we've picked up 4,000 since the World Cup.
We're also, I mean, not to be like too defensive or anything, we're also tend to see October as a pretty low month for downloads for us because I think the excitement of the Premier League or like league starting has worn off. I think you're still like you're getting to the end of MLS, but maybe we don't get quite as much of like an uptick from that. And then you don't have like right now the U.S. national team is not a very exciting thing. So I think all of that factors into making October a month where people are paying attention to other sports or just other things. And then as we get closer to holiday season and the January window and the end of the season, those numbers tend to ebb back up.
And then when we get a tournament, then it'll go really high again. So I would bet as well, if you're someone who runs a website or a soccer podcast or a soccer website, I'll bet there are similar trends throughout because I've seen it on other sites that around about October, after the peak of preseason excitement, previews has died down, you see a tiny dip in like October, November.
Which I think is also reflected in retail. I think retail isn't great in October, but that might just be January. Maybe January is the slowest month in retail, but I think October's not great
There's
either.
Definitely a drop-off from Christmas to not Christmas.
Certainly, yeah, but I think people are saving up in October maybe for like Black Friday and the holiday season to come.
All right, next question. You ready?
I'll ask this one because I think you've done a few in a row. Matt Brayfogle asks, do you have to put your salesman's hat on very often when it comes to generating revenue and getting new ads and sponsors?
So there's not an actual hat, but yes. So the way we get ads is a mix of three things, right? Sometimes advertisers approach us and say, hey, we'd like to place an ad on your show. Sometimes a couple of agencies that we work with will find advertisers and connect them to us, and the agency will take a cut of the fee. But the other third is roughly us seeing companies that we like, reaching out to them and saying, giving them our media kit and saying, hey, this is how much it costs to buy an ad on the Total Soccer Show. This is how we would do it for you. Would you like to buy an ad? Then a week later, we follow up and say, hey, just making sure you got that email. And often the follow-up people will be like, all right, these guys are serious. They've sent the media kit. I will get back to them.
Yes.
That feel about right?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, with any sort of cold calling, cold emailing, you have to do it a lot to get any sort of response. I think Daryl is a bit more consistent in his emailing of advertisers than I am. I'll own that one. But I think Daryl's done a very good job of that one. And I think then that combined with the various agencies that we work with has been pretty helpful. But so too has the scouting network.
And for me, the advertisers that we get by reaching out ourselves are some of the more interesting ones because they're the independent, like they're not gigantic companies, right? I'm thinking of like Fucci or Grip 6, the belts. These are good independent companies that just caught my eye because I was like, oh, I like that product. But then it seemed like a perfect fit to advertise on the Total Soccer Show. Yeah.
And I think, like, I don't know, maybe not to like tip our hand too much here, but I'll say this, that like, when it comes
to...
Not
all secrets revealed today.
Yeah, well, maybe most. But I'll say this, like, I think we get some of the big sponsors that everybody has. We've had we have Blue Apron, we have SeatGeek. Like, you hear about those sponsors a lot. Yeah, exactly. But I think what you kind of have to do if you're starting your own podcast and you want to find advertisers and keep advertisers is that if I listen to a podcast and they have a Casper ad, for example, I feel like you kind of hear that same ad every single podcast because people are reading the same copy. And even if you're trying to
word for word.
Exactly. And even if you're trying to put your spin on it, I think a lot of times that spin is quick interjection and then the copy, and then maybe a quick interjection and then more of the copy. And I think what we try to do, especially with those smaller companies that you mentioned, is make it a bit more unique and a bit more tailored to that advertiser, because in a lot of cases we use, I would say every sponsor we appreciate, we enjoy, and so we try to have that reflect in the ad.
We're lucky enough as well to turn down sponsors if we just don't like the product.
Yeah, we've done that a few times.
It makes sure that every ad we're sort of up for.
Yep. Yeah, and I appreciate that because we've definitely had a few that we were like, no, you do not fit with what we're going for. We appreciate your interest.
Next question.
Yep.
Ed D. Horatius. Oh, I see. You were hinting at this earlier. Ed D. Horatius asks, what is the genesis of the Scouting Network? Was there a model or precedent? I feel like if anyone's listening to this show, you're probably deep enough into TSS that we don't need to explain the Scouting Network.
Yeah.
Fair? Okay.
Yeah, but I think what it was is when, before my wife and I moved back to Richmond when we were still living in Northern Virginia, D.C. area, we were discussing, it was after the 2014 World Cup, we had done a sort of like, if you want to give us some money, that'd be great. If you want to donate.
Donations, and we give you a Brazilian shirt name.
Yes. Or I think it was like any team, depending on the value, I think it was, because you could get like Dutch or Brazilian or something else.
Yeah.
But I think this is when we were looking at how do we make it more of a full-time thing. I believe this was before Patreon, but I might be wrong on that one.
Patreon existed. We just didn't like it.
See, I think you remember it existing. I think it didn't. I think we had a conversation about switching to Patreon at some point, and then we didn't want to do that because it made clear who was a donor.
This is good for a later question, but I will guarantee if you Google when did Patreon start, it'll be before 2015.
Maybe that's when it started. I don't remember Patreon being a thing because I remember us coming up with our own idea for how we get subscribers without ever looking at like, what do they do and how do they do this? We didn't really have any sort of a background as to what our other podcasts doing. We sort of figured it out on our own. And where it came from in my mind, feel free to disagree, but I remember wondering what Manucho Goncalves was up to. That was really what started it. The Angolan striker.
The Man United striker,
Because I remember thinking, like, what do I find interesting in soccer? And aside from, results and tactics and everything, it is sort of the trajectories of people's careers and what happens to them and where Manucho went and how he was doing. And I think we were just trying to figure out the different levels of sponsorship. And that was sort of the genesis for that one was, what if we gave people players to keep an eye on and maybe they become the next big thing, but maybe they don't. And then it's interesting when suddenly they show up on a, Russian Champions League team or a Belgian second division team. And like to keep a tab on all these different players, to keep tabs on all different players, seemed like a thing that people would be interested in, and it seemed like it covered a lot of bases of people who were already into soccer, who wanted another reason to watch Arsenal, or a person who didn't really know anything about soccer but wanted to watch German soccer, and so they wanted a player there, and so you could kind of incorporate more people that way.
And in my head, it was a way of making sure that listeners who were supporting us financially then had some buy-in into the content of the show, right? Because that person's scouting report, it then becomes part of the content of the show. So I thought it was a really good listener buy-in type thing, but I honestly can't remember if that's me now putting because that sounds like something that would be in a business plan, or if that's sort of making hindsight 2020 and correcting it to sound more businessy.
Yeah.
Because I also remember, hope you don't mind me revealing this, there was a longish night at a brewery. As we were generating
and
this
I think bottles of wine beforehand.
And bottles of wine beforehand. So most Total Soccer Show things are done sober, right? But this was definitely a night of, let's meet up, talk about things. We'll go out for a few drinks. It was me, you, and your wife, right?
Yep.
My wife was out of town. And then we'll come back afterwards and keep working on it as well.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think if you do choose to subscribe, the photo of us in front of the bookshelves in your apartment, it was taken that night. I think. Yeah.
And there used to be a thank you photo that was taken in the brewery while
was
we
it really?
were planning this out.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Next one comes from... Oh, is it your turn to ask? Excuse me.
Well, actually, it is, but I want to say one more thing about the Scouting Network. Because we do get people... Like, it is the joke that I think we started, and we hear it a lot, is like, isn't that like Tom Sawyer getting people to paint the fence for him?
I'll say the longer version of Ed D. Horatius' question made reference to that.
Okay. and I guess it is, and like, I will happily laugh along with that because it's the easier way to go because... Generally speaking, I feel like the people who ask me that don't really want to hear my long-winded explanation, but here we are, so here it is, which is that it's really not. It's not about getting people to do a thing that we don't really want to do. It's more about we felt like that was a way, or I'll speak for myself and say, like, I felt like that was a way to get people who would listen to the show and maybe wanted to contribute or wanted to be a part or wanted to help us out, to keep them doing that, but to keep them involved in more than just here's a shirt for you or a sticker or here's extra content. Because personally...
That's my content buy-in idea, right? Is that you own that piece of the show.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I didn't mean this as an ad for the Scouting Network. I really just wanted to answer that.
No, it's all good. Because I personally, like, I'm not taking shots, but I personally get frustrated when there's a lot of content behind a paywall because, and I know that's ironic given some of our sponsors, but in terms of listening to podcasts, like whenever I'm really enjoying one and they're like, and if you want more, you can find this whole episode behind this paywall. I find that slightly to be a bummer. Yeah. And part of that is because I don't still like have that easy subscription where it's just like it shows up in my podcast feed and I feel like you lose some people that way.
That's actually, I think this is a business problem, is in Apple Podcasts, which is the main way that people consume podcasts, there is no way to charge for content, right? So when you do the premium subscription, you always have to go through a third-party app or through someone's website. If it was just, put your thumbprint on here, pay $1 and you'll get the premium content, I think Apple could make it a lot easier to do that.
All right.
Yeah, but they're making it hard.
They are
So
indeed.
we have to get creative.
Shocker that they would do that. Next question comes from Jordan Curate. I'm going to go French.
All right.
Fancy. What does expansion look like for the Total Soccer Show, even if it is only what you guys dream about? Is it being acquired by somebody like The Ringer or The Athletic, or is it building out your own content to include written work on a TSS-branded website? Is it more podcasts? What is it, Daryl Grove?
We also had Ben Beeler and Eddie Horatius ask similar questions. So I think this is a big thing. People ask, like, what does the future hold? What do we want it to be? For me, honestly, it's getting as big as possible while maintaining our independence.
Yep.
Right? That's the sort of broad version of it. I wouldn't want to sell out the show to a bigger network and then they own it and control it.
Yep.
I would like to do work for other networks, right? If Turner Sports or Fox Sports said, hey, could you guys produce a weekly podcast for us? I'd do that while maintaining Total Soccer Show as its separate, independent thing. So maybe the dream version for me is there's the validation and all the connections that come with a big company asking you to work for them while keeping the thing that just is literally owned 50% by Daryl and Taylor.
Yeah. And I'll say this,
Taylor and Daryl.
with the 50-50 share there, I'll say this. I think I took maybe a little more credit for the Scouting Network just now. So I'll flip that around and say I think Daryl definitely gets more credit for keeping us independent. Not to say that we've ever had offers for acquisition that we turned down.
I turned down that $100 million deal.
I mean, we've had a few that we sort of said, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And that's because I think Daryl is more about being an independent program than I was initially. But I think I've definitely come around to that way of thinking because the way you kind of sold me on it was just that we could be acquired and they could offer to pay us a bunch of money. But then there's also a chance that if it doesn't work in 6 months, they're like, yeah, never mind, your contracts are void. But we own your content and we own your show. Good luck out there.
And also, no, you can't go on vacation.
Yeah, and we've seen, exactly, right? And we've seen that happen to people. No, you can't take off Friday, or no, you have to do this show this long about this topic. And that's the thing is like, I don't want to have to talk about a thing that we don't want to talk about because we don't want to talk about it. If we're forced to do something, every show we do, with the exception of like, I don't know, when one of us is sick or tired or something, we generally and genuinely want to be doing.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of it. If somebody said, oh, you have to do a whole Europa League show, but it has to be, I don't know, about this and this and this, like that's not going to be fun. Same way if somebody told us, okay, now you have to do the talking head model of Daryl says this is good, Taylor says this is bad, and you argue back and forth. And we have a question about...
Taylor says LeBron and Daryl says Michael Jordan.
Ugh.
Go.
Yeah. Taylor says LeBron's the best, Daryl says he's not, and then next week you guys are going to switch those positions. And we had a question about, like, how are we still getting along, sort of? I'll knock on wood again.
That question's still in here.
We'll get to it later. But one of the things I would say to that question is here, which is that I think if you structure your show such that you're always debating and arguing, and if you really are set up to be opposition, I think eventually, even if you're playing characters or even if that you're not necessarily really advocating those positions, but you're doing it because that's what the audience, quote unquote, wants, I think eventually that bleeds into your relationship and it gets very combative and debating versus I think you and I are kind of consistently trying to find like common ground and common understanding because usually if there is a disagreement, then we'll talk about it. And if it is like, oh, I think he was doing this, you think he was doing that, we'll have that conversation. Yeah. But if I see it as like, oh, it was this crazy thing, and you're like, well, no, he was just doing this, then you've kind of explained it in a way that I can understand it better, and we move from there.
It's more of us trying to figure out things together, right?
Yeah.
Like, why did that player do that?
Yeah.
As opposed to you taking one side, I take another.
Yeah.
We're looking for an answer rather than to win an argument.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that even when you say win an argument in those talking head shows, there is never, like, outside of somebody saying you're the winner, you need a third party to do that.
Colin Cowherd's off the show.
Exactly. And but it's also that no one is I feel like you've never heard one of those talking head shows because you won't by nature. You've never heard the person at the end say, "Yeah, you're right." Like, I agree. You are correct. And I think
it's not a real conversation.
No, it's not. Yeah. It's a debate that you never have to concede. And I feel like that leads to a lot of open-ended arguments, even if they aren't genuine. I feel like eventually they become genuine arguments.
Okay, before we move on from business and onto the personal lives segment of the show, I want to fully answer Jordan's question. Like, we basically have made very clear that we want to stay independent because we want control of our own content, of our own schedules, of our own lives. But this probably should be a meeting we have separately as a business meeting, but are we just planning to make Total Soccer Show bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger? Or do you have some ambition where you want there to be some other component to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I have talked about doing other variations of a podcast and maybe doing...
we can't give details on that just yet, but we're in the planning stages for a separate podcast that's just me and Taylor that we're thinking about launching this year.
Yeah, and like maybe doing a bit more evergreen, maybe looking at a couple different topics, and then maybe one day like doing other formats or talking about other things aside from soccer. So that's one thing. I think it is doing more shows, not just doing the Total Soccer Show and hoping that eventually it becomes the biggest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Because frankly speaking, there's not a lot of shelf life to a lot of these episodes. That if we do a Champions League review show on a Tuesday night, by Thursday, it's kind of done and people have moved on. Whereas if you're doing... I love Last Podcast on the Left, for example, but because they're profiling crimes or criminals or whatever that are kind of evergreen, you can listen to their entire back catalog and it's fine.
Yeah.
Whereas for us, people aren't probably going to go back and listen to a Champions League semifinal review from 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Doesn't work that way.
So I guess our ambition then is to be able to do other kinds of content.
Yeah.
But the reason that's an ambition and not an immediate reality is we need to make Total Soccer Show successful enough that we have enough free time to do another thing.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. And then I'm going long on this one because
It's fine.
I would also say that, like, I do think, if I'm being totally candid, I have some frustration when I see other folks on TV. I'll leave it at that. Because I do think that we could do a good job. And maybe this is me being
on TV,
a little bit, maybe this is me being a little bit like, I don't know, self-belief or overestimating my abilities.
I like your confidence.
I do get frustrated sometimes when I see programming. I'm just going to leave it as vague as possible. Programming that I think, like, there's not a lot of thought or energy being put into that. And for a much smaller budget, I think you and I could do just as good of a show. And so I think with that in mind, it would be disingenuous of me to say, like, no, I have no dreams of being on a TV show or having our own series or something like that, because I think it could be good and very interesting.
My feeling is I would love to do TV stuff, but I'd want to do it on my own terms. As in, I would like to not just be a guest on something and have to do all the makeup and do it how they do it. I would want some control or input over how we do what we do.
I feel like this is going to be the first season of Jimmy Kimmel where you're like, I'm not wearing a blazer and I'm not wearing a tie. And then very quickly you're like, all right, I'm going to wear a tie.
No one puts Daryl in a tie.
Next question, a bit more personal, comes from Paul Greco. I'm trying to think. I guess outside of a wedding, I don't know when I've seen you in a tie. That's weird.
I actually refused to wear a tie for my graduation photo. I didn't take one. And then the photographer refused to take it until I put a tie on, and then I had to borrow my dad's tie.
You're a proper people.
It was a very embarrassing climb down.
You're proper people, you Brits. It's you and Jake Peralta from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He hates ties. Paul Greco, do you have kids, and what do your spouses think of the Total Soccer Show?
I do not have kids. I think we're not going to have kids. We're going to be a no-kids couple because things are good as they are. And what my wife loves the Total Soccer Show. She loves that it's a thing that I can do and be happy about.
Yep. Same for me. I think my wife and I plan to have kids. We do not yet. She's still in school. As much fun as it is to have a wife in school and then the main source of income be a podcast, not really raking in the bucks there. So, we're holding off until maybe it's a bit more stable. In terms of what she thinks about the show, I would say, and we've said this before, I think we're both very lucky to be with the partners that we are, because I think a lot of other times, or in a lot of other situations, we would have been told, like, okay, that's enough. Go work in an office. Like, we need a little bit of stability, or
honestly, at some point would have been a realistic demand.
Yeah, I think so. Oh, yeah, certainly.
I will say as well, it's not just both our wives are inclined to support what we're doing because I guess they're just happy for us when it's successful. It's also, we've got wives that hadn't settled down in their careers when we started the show, right? So it's all like we're on one big weird adventure together. Like, both of our wives have gone back to school since the show started.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's not as if they were on one career path and they were just waiting for us to get on our career path.
Yeah, man, I forget, like, because we've been doing the show for almost 10 years now. My wife and I have been married for 5, together for 10. You and your wife have been married for 12, 13?
13,
yeah,
2005.
Yeah, and then together longer than that, obviously. So I do forget how long all of this has been. But I think the biggest thing for her has been that I'm doing a thing that I genuinely care about and enjoy doing, and she saw me doing other jobs in our relationship that I did not have that much motivation for.
Same.
And I think she has had that experience too. So the fact that we've kind of made this into a thing is a thing that she is very proud of and appreciates and enjoys. I would say if you're considering doing a podcast for your career, prepare for a lot of quizzical expressions, and I'm very thankful that neither of our wives had those expressions.
All right, you ready for the next one?
Sure.
Alejandro Badani says, it's not even a question, but I love it. Tell us about your dogs! !
They're the best dogs in the world. That's what I'll say. I think I have to say this, though. One of the truest things I've ever heard about dogs comes from the comedian Ron White, who begins a set by saying, I'm a dog lover. And then he pauses and says, I'm not really a dog lover. I love my dog. I don't care about your dog. And that is, I feel like how most people feel about dogs is they love their dogs. I do love Daryl's dog. Austin and I are buddies now. We didn't always start out that way. I have 2 dogs. I've got a big dog and a little dog.
Big dog, little dog. Do you want to give any more details?
Sure.
Guess you can give as much as you want.
Yeah. I didn't mean to name them the most Caucasian names possible, but I ended up doing that. I think my wife and we adopted a half Belgian Shepherd, half Dutch Malinois when she was about 1.5 years old. And when we got her, we were halfway through the first season of Orange is the New Black, and we were super into it.
That's why she's got that name.
That's why. Well, we were looking for strong female TV characters.
Yeah.
And I made the mistake of naming her after a character as the show was ongoing. Same thing as don't buy the jersey of the soccer player until after they've retired, and even then, maybe hold off because Ryan Giggs' stories can come out. So we named her Piper. So we have Piper. Rue Rockwell. Rue was her original name because she was bred to be a whole sniffer dog, attack dog, whatever.
I see. Not because of Wayne Rooney.
No. And then Ellie we found in the streets here in Richmond, and we think she's a Pomeranian Chihuahua, some sort of blend. And her full name, because I learned my lesson from Piper from Orange is the New Black, is Dr. Ellie Sadler Rockwell, named after Ellie Sadler from Jurassic Park.
Lovely.
Lovely. Just saying, that woman wears hiking boots, like high socks and like khaki shorts and a button-up shirt throughout that whole movie. Howard? No, that's in the new one.
Oh, excuse me.
Laura Dern.
Oh, excuse me.
Dr. Ellie Sadler, who's she's a botanist, I believe, or paleobotanist. I'm just saying. Name your dog after a scientist. It's a good aspirational name.
There's one thing you take away from the show is name your dog after a scientist.
Yes.
So I got a yellow Labrador, name of Austin. We got him when he was 1 year old and had never lived anywhere except a farm.
Yeah.
So he was not city ready. He has slowly become city ready. He's now 9 years old.
Yep. Yeah. And you all, I will say, have done a very good job with Austin, because I remember when you first got him and he was not nearly as friendly as he is these days.
That was the England-Germany 2010 World Cup game where I think Germany won like 4-1.
Yep.
Mesut Ozil destroyed Gareth Barry. Austin was either angry at Ozil or angry at you.
A little bit of both. Mostly me.
Mostly we hadn't figured out how to have him welcome guests.
Yeah.
And we figured it out, and everybody's happy now.
Dogs are weird, man.
Dogs are weird.
Dogs are complicated. The biggest thing, here we go, more advice, unsolicited, I would say. If you actually are going to own a dog, it's really hard for me. Dogs aren't people. So don't talk to them like they're people. Like, I forget this all the time that my wife and I will like want Piper, the big dog, to stop doing something. And we'll be like, okay, that's enough now. Or like, hey, why don't you stop? Hey, that's enough. Okay, you're good. But like, just say no. She knows no. She stops at no. But instead I talk to her like she's a child, and then she continues to do the behavior. Simple commands, baby. Simple commands.
Well, it's just better for everybody, right?
Yes,
because the dog understands what you're trying to say.
All right, in that case, Daryl, next question.
It comes from Roland Klein. Roland wants to know, what did you study in college? What did you study, Taylor?
Things that made probably my parents pull their hair out of their head. History, anthropology, and sociology.
History, anthropology, and sociology. All right, give me a quick taste of what that means.
Sure. History was, I had already taken enough history classes that I was halfway through a history major, so I was like, sure, why not? That was when I was still going to be a lawyer. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer.
All right.
Then I realized I didn't really love all the reading and the testing and whatnot. Anthropology and sociology, I've always been interested in the cultural anthropology side as well as the sociology. I think a lot more about like the social experiments. Generally, the ones that were like a violation of ethics were the ones that I found.
Milgram stuff?
Yeah, like that stuff, which is like taught as what you don't do because they're all very illegal.
Here's where we went too far.
Yes, and even a lot of stuff but it's always fascinating to me how quickly stuff gets debunked, because I think when I was in school, the broken windows theory still held, and I believe that has been very much ruled out at this point. Mm-hmm. But that was the stuff that always spoke to me, and if you go back and listen to some of like the first episodes of this show, I think like episode 3 was me interviewing a friend of mine discussing like the green, it's not a revolution, I guess, like the green rebellion in Iran where the players wore green armbands and then were forcibly retired. The kind of intersection of history and culture and soccer has always been sort of my domain. And with that in mind, yes, I've read How Soccer Explains the Universe or whatever it is. I always get that question in response to that statement. So there you
How
go.
Soccer Explains the World.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. That makes more sense.
You apparently didn't read the title.
Yeah, whatever. It's all the same.
So I studied English literature, excuse me, and film production so film studies. It was half production, half academic.
That's what you have your master's in?
Yeah, it's a master's in film studies. So
because you educated.
Because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I think I accidentally got good analytical training, and I think I can take some of those skills and apply them to how we do this show. Yep. But I really sort of landed on my feet and got lucky because I had no plan. Did not know what I was doing.
Yeah, that's about how I was.
I wanted to be in college. That was always what I thought. I want to be in college. It's awesome. It's fun.
Yep.
Really bad way of doing it.
I wanted that.
Tuition was cheaper in those days.
Yeah, true. I wanted that, and I wanted to be Indiana Jones, if I'm being totally honest. I mean, I did. Like, I did, like, archaeological illustration and went on digs in Turkey when I first studied abroad there, and, like, went to Troy, or at least where they presume Troy is, and that was all fascinating. And I was like, oh, it's totally real. Like, there's all of these things happening around Turkey. And then I went back to the United States and realized that there's very limited career opportunities for people who don't spend their entire lives preparing to be an archaeologist. So then, I ended up doing environmental science.
Plus, you're not even scared of snakes.
Nope. Lots of other stuff, though.
Next question from Ian Shank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
it's your turn,
Ian
Trust
Shank,
me, Taylor.
what do you guys do? See, that's why you got to be direct. You got to say. It's the next question, Taylor. Ian Shank, what do you guys do when you're not creating TSS goodness? What's a typical day for each of you? Other gigs, dog duties, housework, time with your significant others, etc.
I found this one tough because I realised, weirdly, a lot of my life revolves around doing the Total Soccer Show. Yep. Which is it's actually just reading the question made me worry about, like, I don't do that many other things. We play soccer, of course, you and I. With my wife, we mostly, it's like get dinner, walk the dog, like go to movies, go to parties. Like, we do social stuff, but I can't say that I have any other major outside interest, which I'm now slightly concerned about. Actually, I will say I help my wife in her job. She has a lot of jobs where she does a thing where she's like involved in planning events here in Richmond. So there's a lot of stuff where I'll just go with her and help her with her thing.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. And what are your other side gigs?
My other side gigs, I do some copywriting, so like advertising writing, and I guess you could also include The Athletic. I do the occasional bit of writing for The Athletic. That's the only sports writing I do right now. I've also done some copy editing for a university, like literally editing their press releases for Grammar and AP Style.
There we go.
Yeah.
For me, my wife is in law school. I think she's almost done. She's like near the end of her first semester of her third year, which means that she is studying all the time, all day, every day, and all night. So usually it's like, hanging out, grabbing dinner, and then she goes back to work.
Richmond's a big dinner town, right? There's a lot of good places where you can just casually go for dinner.
Yeah, with us, honestly, it's more so because like it'll usually be she's studying, I'll come home, I'll make something, we'll eat together, and then she goes back to it. So we don't really go out too often in that regard.
I gotcha.
No, I mean, I think if we go out, it's usually on the weekends, and it's usually like walk the dogs for a really long way, stop and like eat here, stop and hang out here, go back like that. That's usually, and dog walks are a big part of it. And then I'm coaching as well. I coach little tiny 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds. So I do that 4 days a week in the mornings usually. And then we bought our house. We bought an old house in Richmond, and so a lot of that is me again because law school plus podcast equals I do a lot of DIY.
You certainly do, right? Do you watch a lot of YouTube videos of like, here's how you do this thing?
Yeah, to the point that I annoyed my father because he like wanted to give me all of his like home improvement library of this big stack of books about like everything you need to know about plumbing. Yeah. And I didn't mean for this to be as much of a jerk response as it was, but I literally just like held up my phone and was like, yeah, I'm good, thanks. And I didn't mean that to be so mean, but it's true that like, if you're fixing something, go on YouTube and search, like, I don't know, Ken Moore washing machine making this noise, and there will be a video about what that noise is and how to make it stop making that noise. So yes, YouTube is your friend.
Are you ready for the next segment of this?
Sure.
This very odd show.
Uh-huh.
It's the relationship segment, and I think the relationship is you and I. Carlos Sanchez wants to know, how did you guys meet, and how did that evolve into the podcast?
Yeah.
How did we meet, Taylor?
We met. I went to college in Kentucky. I moved back. After
I wasn't there, so
that,
that's not it.
You were not. But basically, like, my introduction to most of my community in Richmond now, despite having lived here for most of my life, was playing soccer again, getting back into playing adult soccer.
Central Virginia Soccer Association?
And that was where we met. I believe I was playing for Church of the Living God.
Yes, you were. CLG Flames.
Yes, with a predominantly African squad and this guy.
Yeah.
I think I've said it before. The back line was like Papa, Nana, Kojo, Hope, and Taylor, obviously.
Ghanaian, right? All Ghanaian except Taylor?
Yes, all of those individuals. I forget who. Yeah, I think it was mostly Ghanaian in that squad. I got recruited by another team, Richmond City, which is where you were playing. We went and played a tournament in Virginia Beach, and that was where we first bonded and chatted.
Was that your first time playing for Richmond City?
I think so. Maybe we had started playing Summer League together, but I think like Summer League was in the middle, or like the tournament was in the middle of Summer League, so maybe we played a couple games, but that was like required a 2-hour trip, and I think that was where you and I talked a bit more and bonded a little bit. And then I think I started writing for the Offside because you were managing the Offside at the time. Then we talked about doing a podcast or a radio show, and it kind of all went from there.
Yeah, and then we pitched it to the public radio station, and the rest is still happening.
Yep. Camden Smith, how have you guys managed doing a show together for so long? Have there been times where you have been upset or angry with each other due to something either with the show or away from the show? If so, how did you two manage to repair the working relationship, friendship? Thanks, and love the show.
Oh, I meant to
love you
that.
too, Camden.
I meant to edit that last part out.
Love you too, Camden.
How have we managed to do a show together for so long? I would say, I'll knock on wood this time as well. I would say, yes, we've definitely had arguments and disagreements. I would say less so than you would expect for the amount of time we spend trying to do something. I want to say like maybe once a month, once every couple months, we disagree on something where things grind to a halt for a little bit. But what I think we're really good at is then trying to, instead of just one person or both of us trying to be right, the thing that we both do really well, I think, is we try and step back and say, okay, what is it specifically that we're disagreeing on, and how do we figure that out? And I want to say 99% of the time, it's then some misunderstanding from like 7 moves back in the conversation. Yeah. Right? So it's about going back to the root of where the disagreement started.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, that goes back to like the whole talking head thing of if you're just trying to be right, then you're probably not trying to find common ground.
If you're trying to be right, you're wrong.
Yeah, there you go. The other thing that I thought has helped with me at least is my wife and I are like big on using feeling words, like I feel this way, but we fundamentally misunderstood how you're supposed to apply that it's not supposed to be like, I feel like you're being a jerk, Daryl. Like I'm still just saying what you're doing. It's supposed to be about how I'm internalizing or how I'm hearing what you're saying. And I think when I had that sort of realization, it was my mother-in-law who explained that one. When I had that realization, it really helped with more like a better understanding of like, okay, not trying to like win the argument, but like what is the disconnect or like what are we trying to get to? And I think remembering that at the end of the day, we're both trying to do a show and both trying to make it a good show.
Yeah.
It sort of is like, okay, so what puts us in the best position? Like, let's not focus on who's right, who's wrong, whatever, but more about like how do we get to the point where we do a good show.
Yep, and I would say I think we can always figure it out because I think we know that each other comes to, especially Total Soccer Show things, but I think to our friendship as well, in good faith, right? Like I think we both know when we turn up that the other one isn't going to turn up having not done the work and like pretend they've watched a game and try and wing it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Because then that would be grounds for like a real actual disagreement where someone's trying to hide something. There's never ever that, right? I never, unless you've been very good at fooling me for the last few years, I never ever suspect that.
The face I was making is I was thinking about how often it's the opposite where it will be one of us texting the other, as you said, a lot of texting, saying like, hey, I haven't had a chance to watch this yet. And the other person saying like, I think a lot of times it's, neither have I. But a lot of times it's like, okay, let's push back an hour. Or like, okay, let's not do this, let's do that instead. Or let's focus on this. And again, that goes back to the honesty aspect of it, that I think there's an element of, I don't want to show up to this office and sort of wing it, knowing that you've put it in, like, that doesn't seem like a fair amount of effort. If you're putting in a ton and I'm just showing up and winging it, that doesn't really work for me. So I think it's much more about, like, the respect I have for my colleague here is what like I always kind of go back to when I'm like, do I really want to watch this game at 11 o'clock at night and I'm tired? Yes, because Daryl's going to watch it, and I need to be on that same level. So there you go.
You're my motivator as well.
There we go.
Okay, similar question-ish comes from Michael Hastings Black. He wants to know, who are the US men's national team players or US men's national team perspectives that you two disagree on? For example, if this were a shout show, what would be the recurring arguments? P.S. Thank you for not being a shout show. I sort of deliberately didn't talk about this with you beforehand.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't think of one.
The only one, I think you are maybe a little bit more forgiving of certain players than I might be. So I think
are we naming certain players?
Well, yeah, I think we disagreed on Bobby Wood for a very long time.
Oh, yeah.
I think we've talked about that before, that you were willing to see like the runs he made as a sign that but he could do good things, and I wasn't quite on board with that. I don't know. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's been one that we really – I think actually I would say the one until recently that maybe we disagreed on that I was just more so like – he's fine, and you were like, he is not good, or he is not as good as he should be, is DeAndre Yedlin. And I think that's one that I have come around to your way of thinking about.
Ooh, this sounds like I might have been ahead of the curve on these two.
I mean, definitely on DeAndre Yedlin. I think that's one that it's sort of because he was just he's always going to be the right back for me. It sort of is like, that's just who he is.
And even for me, he's probably still my first choice right back. It's just that I've got worries about this and that.
But I think because he was
Team Reggie Cannon.
There we go. But I think because he was always going to be the right back, it goes back to the complacency thing of if you don't have somebody challenging you and you know you're going to be the right back, do you work that hard? Similarly for you and me, if I just know it's going to be DeAndre Yedlin, I think I've never consciously thought this, but I think there's a subconscious. It's going to be him, so what's the point? What's the point in really saying oh, I wish you could do this, I wish you could do this, I wish you could do this, because it feels like you're just going to end up harping on the same issues over and over again, but it doesn't really get anywhere because there's nobody else pushing him. I think, to your point, now that Reggie Cannon's in there, and it does feel like, maybe not right away,
but some competition.
But there's going to be some competition. It becomes more of a talking point now because Reggie Cannon didn't turn his back when that cross came in. Just saying.
I also think one of the reasons we don't have much disagreement on US men's national team is because we watch the games together and we rewatch the games together. So we're often seeing it through a very similar perspective because anything you notice, you share with me, and anything I notice, I share with you. So it's almost like we're working from the same set of information.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I think also, I think this connects, but I don't think that you and I are people. This is going to sound very pretentious, but here we are. We're doing the show, whatever.
Yeah.
I also think that you and I aren't hard and firm people, if that makes sense. That I'm not like, Michael Bradley is the best number 6 there is in the U.S. Prove me wrong.
Or Michael Bradley should never play for the U.S. again.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong.
And because I don't
we're both sitting at that table with the sign on.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that's a great way to live personally. And I feel like it closes you off to the opinions of others. And if you listen to somebody say something, you can think okay, I can see how that doesn't really work. I mean, that's what happened with Yedlin. I was hearing you talk about this doesn't work, looking at him and realizing maybe so, versus if I said, no, he's the best right back, I would just maybe not even pay attention to what you're saying. And I think it closes off a lot of your ability to see what's actually happening. And so because of that, though, I think that also is a reason why maybe we don't have that many hard and firm disagreements, rather, because we tend to talk everything out and kind of figure out where the other one is or figure out some commonality.
Yeah, and because we don't have any hard and fast rules or decisions, then there's not too much to argue about because we're arguing sort of around the edges on everything anyway, right? Or debating.
Yeah, and then the last thing with that is you're a Wolves fan and I'm a Man United fan. I would definitely say my Man United bias is more evident than your Wolverhampton bias. But I also still don't...
Mostly because Wolves haven't been in the Premier League for so long that there's been nothing to be biased for or against.
I was going to let you say that. But I
had strong feelings about whether Ruben Neves should have been in the Portugal World Cup squad.
You did.
For example.
You certainly did. But I still think, though, that we don't go to that level of my team doesn't do anything wrong and your team is doing all the things wrong in a game. I think, again, we don't have that level of the U.S. national team has never done anything wrong and Mexico are always the aggressors. We're aware that there's a fair amount of nuance in that relationship. Yeah. So I think that also, again, it doesn't lead to, no, my team's the best, your team's the worst. No, this player's the best and the one you like is the worst. Although that is the case for most of your favorite players.
Are you ready for the next segment?
I think so.
So the next segment is all about our playing, I'm going to put these in quotes, careers, because people hear us talk about professional soccer a lot, and we occasionally reference games we've played in, and I think people want to know sort of what level we're talking about, right? Yeah. Exactly. Basically, are we any good at soccer, I think, is the subtext of a lot of these questions.
Sure.
Okay, so Vivian Chase asked, what is the highest level of soccer you've played? Have you ever won a championship?
The highest level I was very much a bench warmer for a D3 college team. That was my probably highest level in terms of like highest level of competition. I would say going to like the Dallas Cup. With the Virginia team, where they had like Adam Christman and Denny Carbassioun on it. That was a very good squad.
That's a big deal, like youth soccer thing, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever won a championship? I know that you have, but I'm going to let you list it.
I mean, I've won tournaments and stuff like that at youth level. I guess, and then I won like amateur level. We won. The team I was playing for won the Premier League here in the CVSA. Which
you did. Metro Sting, right?
Metro Sting, exactly. Yeah, and that's what CVSA at the time may still had like I think 8,000 registered players, 4,000 active for a city at the time that was like I think 200,000 people.
Yeah,
that's not so bad.
Yeah, no, it's a good standard. CVSA is a good amateur standard.
Yep.
We also won the 7th division last year with our team. I guess we'll get to talk about in a later question. For me, the highest level I played was at youth level. I played for the youth team of Stourbridge Town, which is on the 7th tier of English soccer.
There we go.
So not even close to being, pretty far away from being
You're basically in the Premier League.
Professional team. I played for their youth team. I also played or was involved with a very, very good high school team that won the West Midlands Cup, which is like a state championship. But I was very much a bench player because the other guys on the team, while I was playing for, say, Stourbridge, they were on the youth teams of Aston Villa and Wolves and Coventry City and like serious professional teams. So I was very much the odd one out on that team.
All right.
Yeah. Luckily, I'm charming, so they let me hang around.
There we go.
Yeah, I just didn't play that many minutes.
Didn't you have to be a ball boy at one point, or am I making that up?
I got subbed out of a game in the first half. There wasn't a question about make Daryl relive his worst ever moment, but I guess we're going to do this. Okay. So we're playing Lissos High School. I started in centre midfield, so I was excited, like, I get to start for this team. We were 2-0 down within 25 minutes. I got subbed out in the first half and asked to, I think the linesman had to leave or something. So the ref asked me to run the line. Oof. No, sorry, my coach said, go run the line.
Yeah.
And I think he thought maybe I'll just give him something to do, or maybe it was punishing me for my very poor performance. But I ended up being a linesman and watching my team come back from 2-0 down, draw 2-2, to basically rescue a game that I had almost ruined on my own.
I didn't remember it being that depressing,
it's
terrible.
I'm
sorry I brought it up. The next question I am going to ask you, and then I'm going to let you answer for yourself, and then I think I might ask you to answer for me, but we'll see. Comes from Sergio Rodriguez. What player in history would each of you resemble in playing style?
Okay, so I know we were both a bit nervous about answering this because it can sound arrogant if you say, I'm like this player.
Yes.
But my answer is I've got a player in my head when I play centre-back that I want to be, and in my best moments I think of myself that way, knowing full well that I am very, very short of playing like this player. And for me, it's Rio Ferdinand.
Okay.
Right? I like to think, like, when things are going well, that I'm a centre-back who can cover some ground, get to the ball first, and then once you get the ball, be quite calm with it. Okay. So you're sort of strong, make tackles, but not in a clumsy way, and then be somewhat composed on the ball. And don't go dribbling up the field, but at least can either ping a pass in one direction or find a pass and start to make something happen.
All
so
right.
the player I'd like to resemble playing style is Rio Ferdinand.
All right.
Yeah.
I think the player that for most of my playing career, I was like, again, this sounds so self-indulgent because we're like,
let's do it.
Here's the pro that I'm most like. But I think...
So it's like a cross between Pele and Leo Messi, Diego Maradona and George Best, right?
Yeah, definitely. No, it's more I'll say this. Like right now, I think I play 8 different positions depending on what is needed. So, but I think most of my youth career growing up and then into college, I was a right midfielder. I ran a lot. I ran cross country in high school. So I was like up and down running a whole bunch, high work ethic, lots of crosses. And I think the other thing that informs what I'm about to say is that I played for a club where we weren't allowed to wear anything other than predominantly black shoes. We had to keep our shirts tucked in because we were supposed to be good old school soccer players. We had to pack our own soccer bags. Your parents didn't pack them. You had to be accountable. Yeah. So with that in mind, I feel like there's an old school aspect of it. So I feel like I would say Ryan Giggs is what I would say.
Like on the wing, yeah.
Nowadays, not nearly as fit, not nearly as up and down on the wings.
Hey, neither is he.
So I'd be curious because you have known me more so in that, I don't know, playing a variety of positions, doing different jobs. So I'm curious what you would say to this question.
I actually think you're a very hard player to define. So for our low division team, you played left centre back last weekend. I don't think that's your best position, but you were very good at it, right? For our indoor team and for the outdoor Premier team, you play as basically a striker, a centre forward, but not like a target Harry Kane type forward. So I almost think of you as
despite the fact that I am slower than Harry Kane.
Yes. I think of you as like a an attacking midfielder who's playing up front in some way.
All right.
Is that
yeah.
fair?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just so curious who that would be. I have no idea.
Don't know.
That's the thing. Is like, I couldn't come up with anybody.
That's why I'm finding it hard. Maybe it's like when maybe it's not a good comparison right now or a good example right now because he's not doing great. But like when Alexis Sanchez played as a forward,
I do love my dogs,
even though he's a winger and you love your dogs and you got 2. So maybe Alexis Sanchez is the way to go.
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the good hairstyling. He's a fit young man. He plays piano.
Were you hoping for someone else? Was there someone you were hoping I would say?
Not really.
It's a good roundabout way of getting you.
Not really, because I don't think, even though I think you have correctly labeled me as a dribbler. Like I don't think I'm that good at dribbling. Still, I feel like it's a lot of very basic moves. So I wouldn't say.
I do. They seem to fool people a lot.
I'm not a very flashy player. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like I'm not doing a lot of like double step overs or anything like that. It's a lot of cut and then dribble past somebody. Hopefully, theoretically.
Okay. Jaron Wright wants to know, give us the details of your rec league. How serious are you?
Oh, boy.
What's the format? Is it 11-a-side, regular-sized field, for example? Do you all practice? Do you assign roles? And do you actually design plays? It seems pseudo-serious from the bits and pieces we hear on the pod.
Yeah. So I'll say, I still play 2 different teams on Sundays. That's not long for this world because I'm 34 years old and I feel every minute that I play. I had a hard time walking Sunday night after playing 2 full games. But I think I would say that the upper level team, strangely, is not nearly as serious or tactically planned out as our lower division team.
Yep. Okay. So should we focus on the lower division team stuff? Because at least that's one that we are now both on. So our lower division team, we play in the second lowest division in our amateur league, where the competition is always a mix of good players and bad players on the opposition team. Right? It's a really odd mix. I would say we take it more seriously.
I would say you either get a team that has bad players and then some very good players, or you get an entire team of okay players.
Yeah,
that's how I would explain it.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. I would say our team takes it more seriously than any other team in our division, and I think it's because we've done that to our team.
Yes.
Yeah, but in a good way. So do you mind if I sort of explain our team?
Have it.
So our team is about 50% made up of guys from a recovery centre, where guys are in drug and alcohol rehabilitation, and guys who are now sober, that have been sober for a long time. That's what the team is set up for. And there's Taylor and I. Essentially, Taylor's head coach. I'm sort of administrator and chief tackler.
Yeah. You think it's only 50%?
Actually, I don't know the exact.
That was the thing I was thinking.
Rough guess,
yeah, because it's like around there, 50-60%. I'd say, people who've either gone through the facility or are sober or are mentors or what have you. And then you have other volunteers. Our goalkeeper is my brother-in-law. One of our other midfielders is my brother-in-law. So not a lot of people trying to play.
5% of the team is Taylor's family.
Yeah, pretty much. But mostly that's because nobody else wants to play goal, and Drew is willing.
3 members of the team are people who are now friends, but were originally Total Soccer Show listeners.
This is true.
Do you remember when we just put a shout out hey, we need some extra players? Can you come and play for
Is it only
team?
3?
3 recent additions.
There we go. Yeah, that makes sense. But with that,
they know who they are.
Yes. But so with this, all that is to say that we don't say you have to have played soccer, you have to have played at a different level. It's basically anybody from that facility who wants to try to play soccer is more than welcome. And so we'll get people who are 55 years old and have never played soccer before. We'll get people who are 21 years old and played soccer their entire lives and anything in between. And that's why we
some guys who played a bit of college but then dropped out,
exactly.
for example. Yeah.
So that's why we do it in such a regimented way, is because we run practices, but the practices are how to pass, how to receive, how to turn, how to communicate, how to shoot. It's a lot of basic stuff, and that's why what we have found is then, in terms of preparing for games, the more prepared you are, obviously, the better it's going to go. But if people are new to the game, the more specific instruction you can give them, and because that's what I've realized is really difficult, is saying, hey, we just got to calm down. There's no real way to do that, right? You can't say just calm down. That's the worst thing you can say to a person who's stressing out or doesn't know what to do. So you've got to try to find ways to explain to people, hey, here's how you can calm down. Take an extra touch. Make sure you're listening. Make sure you communicate a little bit. Just finding ways to do that. So I think that's where a lot of the structure comes from. Yeah. If that makes sense?
It does. And then we implement some pretty serious tactics, right? Definitely more so than other teams in our division. We have a very specific shape, and we make sure that people stay in that shape.
Don't give it away.
We have pressing triggers. We have times when we drop off. We set a line of confrontation where everybody knows where it is. And I think because we actually haven't had practice in a few weeks, right? But because we run practices in pre-season and for the first few weeks of the season, season, we have time to work on these things, which I think most teams do not.
Yeah.
I think our whole team benefits because of it.
Yeah. And I also think there's an element of, like, we always try to be there 30 minutes before the game. We do actual warm-ups, so we do, like, running lines, stretching circle, 5v2. And I was talking with other brother-in-law, not Drew, but Evan, and he was saying that he thinks there's like something to be said for the intimidation aspect of that. That we've played teams that probably were better than us, but when we have 18 people showing up half an hour before the game, ready, warming up, like fully ready to go, and they have 9 people 5 minutes before kickoff, it's a big difference. And that's why I would say if you're starting your own team, be it indoor or outdoor, the more organized you can be and the more sort of planning and connectedness you can have in that unit, the better off you're going to be.
The big thing is to get buy-in from your team, right? If everybody's like, no one thinks, oh, this is silly that we're doing warm-ups, then you're really onto something. Because then everybody warms up and does it properly and you're ready to go.
Yes. Yeah. And the final thing I would say, just for me personally, Daryl is definitely better about this than I. But I think I used to fancy
I know it's not shooting. That's
no, it's this. I used to fancy myself like sort of laid back, and I think I once said like in high school, like, I think I'm not very competitive. And our friend Kevin like turned to me and said, like, dude, you are the most competitive person I've ever met. And my brother-in-law Evan, I think echoed similar sentiment recently. So I think that's also part of where, if it sounds like we take it seriously, it's because I think when it comes to soccer, really with anything, if I value it, then I'm going to take it very seriously. And I think that's kind of what helps the show work, because I think we both have that mentality. I think that's
because we treated it like it was professional even when it wasn't.
Yeah. And I think that goes for the team as well. But then for me, a little bit, it can be about like, we're losing and I don't want to lose. And that's where Daryl is like, hey, man, let's keep positive. So that's always a good
sometimes
reminder.
the best way to not lose is to spread that positivity around,
I suppose that's true.
Lift some people up. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah. I just, to paraphrase Dennis Leary, I try not to yell. I try not to hit. I find that waving the gun around gets the point across.
Tim Barnes. Yeah. Tim Barnes says, on a recent episode, Taylor mentioned a specific set of touches he tries to get in at least 300 of before a game. What are these touches called? Bigger question, how do you prepare and warm up for your games? And this is actually 3 questions. I've just realised only one. How do you stay in shape? E.g., like running, playing often, sitting around, playing murder ball.
Oh, murder ball. It was Death Ball. Death Ball was a drinking game that I briefly played, and then my friend almost died.
So can we do this one at a time? I'm also aware that we're in danger of going long, so we should maybe do this quickly. The thing where you try and do 300 touches before a game, what is it called?
Curver.
Curver.
Coerver.
That was going to be my next question. Yeah. Curver. Okay. What are the touches called again? How do you prepare and warm up for your games? Quickly, what's our warm-up process for
We do like 2 lines, 2 parallel lines, running lines. You do like, high knees, then like high, like feet up, face in, face out, that sort of stuff to get sort of the muscles loose. Then you do some stretching. I like to do dynamic stretching as well. So like raising your, like, lifting your leg as high as you can and like opening the gate, closing the gate, all that good stuff.
Opening the gate. Oh, okay. I get it. And then maybe some 5v2 if you want to up the tempo a little bit. Okay. Then the other thing, how do you stay in shape?
That is a thing that I'm learning to do, to be honest, because like I think we both had this, but there was definitely a period in my life where I was playing maybe 8 games a week.
I was playing multiple indoor games every weeknight and then playing on the weekends.
Exactly. Yeah. And so with that, you kind of don't have to do much more than that. I've never really been a gym person. That's not a thing I enjoy. So it's been, for me, it's about changing the way I eat as much as I can. Changing how much I drink and what I drink is another big one. I like IPAs. Don't drink a lot of those. Lots of calories in there. And then, I think like if I can run with the dog, the big dog particularly, then I will do that. Little dog, not so much of a distance runner.
Because tiny legs.
She's 10 pounds. Yeah.
My things I do outside of soccer, I bike to the office almost every time. Back and forth. It's about 3 miles, so like 6 miles biking a day. Yeah. It's pretty good.
I bike my car to the office.
You do bike your car, but it is a Fred Flintstone car.
Yeah.
And then I swim. I love swimming because I can do it without putting much impact on my legs. Because I'm at the age, I'm 38 and a bit, like 11, 12s, where if I was constantly doing things that were just my legs, my knees are going to give out. I've been, knock on wood, very hard. Lucky with no big knee injuries, but biking and soccering, I needed a form of exercise that didn't hurt my knees at all, swimming was what I found.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And luckily, there's a swimming pool halfway between the office and my apartment.
I can't.
So that works out.
I hate swimming.
Why do you hate swimming?
Oh, first of all, I'm terrible at it, so that's a big part of it. I've just never, no matter how at my most physically fit, I probably couldn't swim 2 laps without being like, I'm so exhausted, because it is just a completely different muscle group, right?
Yeah.
And then I think also, if I know we're going long, I'll be quick with this one. I think you're better. I think like you and my wife are similar in that you can kind of be alone. Like, I think you don't mind swimming for a while. When she walks the dogs, she doesn't listen to anything. If she's doing yard work, she doesn't listen to anything. I am pretty constantly have headphones in if I'm not doing other stuff. Yeah. So I'm listening to podcasts, listening to music, listening to books on tape. And so that's the other thing is like, I know they make waterproof headphones, but I don't know how that works. So that's another aspect of it.
Maybe there's affordable waterproof headphones and someone explains the science to you. You could go swimming and listen to a book on tape.
Could, but won't.
All right, you ready for a couple more?
Sure.
We are now entering the miscellaneous section of all kinds of questions. First one's a long one, but I think a really interesting one. It's from Sean Cleary. Okay, you ready? I guess I've decided I'm asking this, but I'll ask this long question.
Sure.
Sean says, since you do about 5 to 6 hours of audio a week, I listen to both of you talk more every week than everyone in my life except for my wife and kids and 2 co-workers. We've never met, but
that's correct, by the way. That is the correct amount to listen to us.
We've never met, but through listening to you for so long and through social media, I feel like we're in a weird one-directional friendship. I think it also helps that I have similar interests to both of you. My wife generally doesn't listen to the show, but she knows both of your names and you will occasionally come up in conversation. I also have several other friends that I've gotten to listen to you and we talk about the show as well. My main question is, are you aware of this host-listener dynamic and what's it like from your end?
Yes, I think I'm aware of that. Yeah. And I think I'm aware of it because it's not just people we've never met before. Like I'll run into like friends from college or friends from high school who will be like, oh, I feel like I talked to you yesterday because they listened to the show. So that's it. Like, I kind of forget that there's that connection with it. And really the thing that drove it home was going on tour this summer. And it genuinely, like, I think I was pretty close to like crying every show just with how many people listen for a year or 2 years or 4 years or whatever, how many people came out. It was kind of amazing because, we said the numbers and we told and how long we've been doing it, but it still is a very abstract thing until you meet people and realize like, oh, there really are people listening in Omaha and Tulsa and elsewhere. I'll
be honest, for me, that's really overwhelming. And that's when you said it's emotional, like it's really overwhelming to hear that someone gives you that much time a week, right? Yeah. Like I almost feel like I'm not worth that much time. Maybe someone shouldn't give me that much time a week. So it's really flattering and overwhelming to hear that. The flip side of it is when you meet someone, and as Sean explains, this one-way friendship, I actually feel at a disadvantage because this person knows certain things about you. They know more now that we've done this show, and yet you don't know anything about this person. So my inclination is always to want to ask that person a load of questions because they know me. I want to know them.
I think that's pretty much what ended up happening when we were on tour. There's a lot of questions about how they found the show or how long they've been listening or what do they like or what don't they like. Or it tends to be a lot of questions asked back, I think.
Yeah, which I think is an interesting way to try and get to know people as quickly as possible. And also, weirdly, I'm not sure I want to talk about. I think people want to talk about soccer stuff if they meet us, because that's obviously the thing that we both know about. But I'm suddenly just super interested in just, hey, who is this person? What are they doing? Like, what's their whole thing? So I'm always really, really interested in that.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely.
I also want to double down on what you said, where if it's someone you already knew, but then you haven't spoken to them for a while, but then they've been listening to the show, that is the weirdest situation. Because it's a person where you thought your relationship ended at 2013, but you find out it doesn't. They've been listening to you for 2 or 3 years since.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing that we find out, like as we do the show, is like the variety of people that are listening and how that informs. Like I think I've had a lot of opinions or feelings change based on some like responses we've got or tweets we get or just knowing that people are out there like listening with their kids. So like we don't want to curse too much because people are listening with their families. And so like that informs it. But then just other stuff of like sometimes it can be a bit much, but then there are times when like there's language that we'll use that somebody says like, hey, that can be taken this way, or like, I didn't like this thing, or like, have you thought about it this way? And I think even though it is us talking into microphones and not meeting people, I think a lot of the times, though, the way we choose to think about the show and the feedback we get on the show helps us evolve as persons, I guess, is the best way I can put that.
I think people would have been the better word, but yeah.
I think people as a group, persons as individuals.
Oh, I see. All right, interesting.
That's how I just thought about it in my brain.
3 more miscellaneous questions.
All right.
First one is from Robert Cordova.
Would you like me to ask some? I feel like you've had to ask all of them, and then I've
sort of
rambled on for forever.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, yeah, you have taken over hosting. Because, going all the way back, I believe when we first started, I was the host. And then I went away for a couple of years. And maybe that was making it difficult for me to host.
Snooze, you lose.
Robert Cordova, what gets tweeted at the TSS Twitter account in an average day? Is there anything you would want more or less of?
Ooh, that's interesting. What gets tweeted at the TSS Twitter account? A lot of news, actually. People loop us in on news, and sometimes I find out things because someone's tweeted it at us. I guess, weirdly, the thing I would want less of is having the same news tweeted at us like 20 times. But sometimes there's only one person doing it, so it's hard to know how widespread some news is, right? So there's no way to solve that, and I'm actually happy to be getting the news.
Yes.
Okay.
I think we talk about a lot of stuff, and I really don't listen back to our episodes, like, ever. So I think a lot of times I forget things that we've said on the show. So when I get like, oh, I got that reference, or like, oh, you said this, or Taylor, you missed this, or Daryl, you said that, like, I enjoy remembering that stuff and hearing like, oh yeah, somebody got that random reference to Brooklyn Nine-Nine or whatever. Yeah, I enjoy that. The one thing that probably frustrates me more than it should, and again, I feel wary of saying this because I feel like now people are going to do it just to troll me, is when people attribute, like, if Daryl is like, oh, like, DeAndre Yedlin frustrates me so much, and then someone says like, oh, Taylor, you were frustrated with DeAndre Yedlin. I was like, I wasn't. That was him. Like, and we get that sometimes, or we'll get like maybe the approximation of what we said.
Yeah.
So if Daryl, I can't even think of a good example, but just like if you say, oh, I didn't think the USA-Cuba game was good, and then somebody hears that as like
the one on the long grass where Pulisic looked miserable?
Like, or like I liked that, or like whatever, and then somebody's like, oh, Daryl said he hated the USA-Panama game, like because they've kind of crossed those two in their heads.
Yeah.
That happens sometimes, and things get attributed to us that we didn't say or didn't advocate. That can be a little frustrating.
We also, weirdly, I've noticed we've started getting a lot of people essentially not live tweeting, but live responding to the episode as they listen. So you'll almost, if you step back and don't respond, you can wait 45 minutes and you can see which part of the episode they're at because they're sending you responses to what we've said. And I've got to say, half of the time I really like it because some people have really interesting opinions, and half of the time it's just people criticizing our opinions, which is less enjoyable.
Yeah, 100%. Because I can like criticism's criticism. That's fine. As I said, I think it helps us grow on occasion. And I think you've responded to a few emails about this, that if you say like, no, you guys are idiots and here's why, not responding to that. But if like,
because why even start?
Yeah, exactly. Because, and that's the thing that like I enjoy like interacting with people, but I kind of don't know where to take that because I don't think I've ever said to you outside of being in jest, like, Daryl, that's stupid. Like, that's just not. So I don't know where to take that conversation because it feels like it's instantly adversarial. Versus, hey, have you guys thought about this? It makes me want to have more of a dialogue and take what the person says a bit more sincerely.
Yeah, because you think, oh, this might be a fun conversation. Even if we disagree on something, we'll disagree in a fun way. Versus someone's going to send blunt statements at me and not be friendly.
Yes.
I'll tell you the thing I do sometimes. If someone does send something like that and it's on the line, I can't quite tell if it's friendly or aggressive. I'll go back and look at their Twitter profile and see what the rest of their tweets are like. And if most of their tweets are friendly, I'll sort of say, oh, they probably meant this in a friendly way. If most of their tweets are very similar, like harsh critiques of other podcasts and to other like writers or this and that, I'll be like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think this connects, but I would say this as well. Like the only thing, like, We've muted some people, but like whatever, we can deal with Twitter.
Naming no names, naming no handles.
No, the only thing that like annoys me that isn't really related to Twitter, but I feel like is worth bringing up, is when we get negative reviews for stuff that like I can handle if we're not your cup of tea. Fine. Some people don't like hilarious, amazing soccer shows as their cup of tea, but I wish that like maybe people thought about what they were doing on occasion. Like we've had a few people say great show 1 star because they didn't click the number of stars. We had one person I think give us a bad review because they didn't like the results of the game. And like sometimes those are a little bit frustrating, I think, more so than like negative tweets and stuff like that, because it sort of is like, oh, but like that's one where I can't even respond. That's one where I just have to be like, all right, well, I guess I shouldn't have said that Manchester United wear red. I don't know.
I actually think there are some people, say Sean Cleary thinks of us as in this friendship, which I like to think that's the correct way of looking at it. I think there are other people who see us as almost like a utility. And like when your water gets shut off or there's something wrong with your water, you complain and that's how you fix it. And I think we get some of that as well. People just think the way to make the show more like how they want the show is just to complain at us as if there's a customer service department. Yeah. And we'll fix it on a future show.
Yeah. Because, I mean, trust me, there's definitely stuff that I say that is probably obnoxious and annoying. I mean, I don't need to say it probably. It is.
Sundays between kickoff and full time.
Yeah, almost always. And I totally get that. And like I can handle that sort of critique, I guess it is. But yeah, when it's just like stuff that we haven't necessarily said or positions we haven't really advocated or stuff that I feel like, no, I had a more nuanced take on that one and you're saying I said this team sucks.
They're saying you guys obviously hate Arsenal.
Yeah. I don't hate anybody.
A secret anti-Arsenal agenda.
I really
chose that team at random.
I'm really trying to think now if there's a team that I actively dislike. And outside of like, I don't know, like Beitar Jerusalem, not a big fan of them. But outside of like,
fans?
Like those types of reasons, there's no team that I actively dislike. So whenever we get accused of having a bias one way or the other, I find that curious.
All right, ready for the next question?
Sure.
Konstantinos Kaliagas says, Daryl, what is the one American thing you are still not used to or had the longest time getting used to? Taylor, are there still English things Daryl says or does or refers to that you still don't understand?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
All right. The one I guess that we've talked about a bunch is the just about. That took a while to figure out. It really did because there was a period of time.
Have you just about got that now?
I don't know is the answer because I don't know if I choose to accept it the way you want it to be. But that really did confuse me for like a good month before I brought it up. Of like, but he didn't get it, so I'm confused by why he just about got it, or he did get it, so why are you saying just about? So that, but aside from that, the only thing that really ever continues to throw me is I feel like you watched a lot of comedy in your teenage years, but it was stuff that was specific to England.
Yeah.
So you'll make a lot of references to stuff that I'm just like, sure.
Yeah.
But no, not really.
I sometimes assume, say, growing up, everyone will have seen, or everyone who was in my friend group would have seen, say, Alan Partridge.
Yeah.
Right? So I have this weird thing where I still assume everybody's seen that, even though that show was not big here at all.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And so, but I think we have lots of English friends who I find, like we have our one friend Pav who says class about everything. And I definitely was like, why is everything class, man? Like, I don't think you have as much of that slang permeating your general vocabulary.
Yeah.
And
I like to vary it up a bit.
Yeah.
Mix it up.
Yeah. And I think also you've been here for a very long time. So
say awesome a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Super. Is what Daryl says.
Super. All right. What is the? What was the question? What is the one American thing you're still not used to, or had the longest time getting used to? Without getting too deep, it's politics. American politics is so extreme in a way that I'm not used to at home. Is that I don't want to get myself in too much trouble. Maybe a good example is maybe.
Actually, if you don't mind, I would like to know that. Like, what do you mean in terms of what? Because I would say, like, you hear plenty about Brexit and the factionalism.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, like, what do you think? Without going into specifics, I understand. Like, what is it that makes it extreme in comparison to British politics?
I'll give you one big example. Conservatives have been in power in England, or in the UK, for a good long time, and they passed a Civil Union Act, so that gay people could get married in the UK. I find it very hard to imagine the equivalent party on the right doing something similar in the United States.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So there's a bit more of the centre-right party will do some liberal things that I can't imagine happening here. And here it feels like two extremes and everybody's at war.
Do you feel like in England, maybe Brexit aside, if you can do that, they're going to try to, I guess. Do you feel like there is as much maybe hesitation around like bipartisanship as there is in the United States? Because it does feel like that's a thing in recent years that has become more like you don't work across the line, or you're seen across the aisle, you're seen as like betraying your group.
So there's an equal, not equal. There's a similar amount of bipartisanship, but I think there's a pre-existing agreement on certain things, right? So the Conservative Party, for example, has no major plan to privatise the entire national health service system, right?
Yeah.
They're going to tinker around the edges and privatise various parts of it. But the left-wing parties and the right-wing parties in England, maybe not some far-right parties, but they agree on the basic idea of we're all in this together and healthcare is a thing that we share among all of us. Whereas I don't think that opinion holds true across the United States.
No.
Fair?
You know?
Which actually leads me to the thing I still can't get my head around is the healthcare system.
Yep.
Because it's so complicated. And I say that as someone who who really spends a lot of time reading my insurance policy and figuring things out. The whole idea of like co-pays and deductibles and all of that, I understand it, but I don't understand why it's a good idea. You get what I'm saying?
I think it's because...
I don't think I ever will.
Yeah. All I can say is I think it's because it's the system that most people grew up with. And so it becomes that which you grew up with is that which is normal.
Yeah.
And so then the other becomes the other, becomes the outside thing. And so it becomes like, ooh, that's weird. That's some European socialism thing.
Yep.
Which I'm tipping my hand to say, yeah, I'd be fine with that.
But that's just a thing that even though I understand the details, I don't understand the emotional or psychological stuff behind it. I don't think I'll ever be able to get on board with that. Same with public transport. I think in non-major cities, there's definitely a weird thing where people are wary of public transport, maybe in a way that they don't need to be.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. And I think I would agree that maybe we've answered that question.
Okay.
So we'll go to the final question, which I guess you should ask.
Okay, it's from Caleb Paget. Also, Jose Ochoa and Mike Chapman had similar questions. Taylor, how did you end up living in Istanbul, in Turkey? What career did you have which let you move to another country?
I didn't have a career. That's why I could move.
You had a job though, right?
No. My wife, then girlfriend, got a grant from the government while she was in undergrad to go study abroad for a year, basically learn a critical language. She had to repay that service with a year of work for the government.
Are we allowed to say what the grant was? I actually want to test myself to see if I can remember the name of it.
Sure.
Is it the Boron Fellowship?
It is the Boron Fellowship, yeah. So there you go. Well done, my friend. So she was going to Turkey. I had already been to Turkey. She had already been to Turkey for 2 months while we were dating. And I was working in a cubicle and I had no background in my job. So I said, yeah, sure, why not? It was when we were still doing the Total Soccer Show part-time. We had 4 other co-hosts. So that was a little bit of an issue. Like, not an issue, but it was more so like, do I want to leave that? But we moved there, and then I got a job teaching SATs to Turks while we were there, to Turkish high school kids. And then we ended up working for a publication and investment guide that took us from Turkey to northern Iraq, and we were there for 6 months. Then we moved back to the U.S., and she worked for the State Department. And then
what was the name of the city in northern Iraq?
We were in Erbil and Sulaymaniyah.
All right.
Yep.
I'm asking that because I think people will ask that.
Yeah. It was in the north. It was where the Kurds are. The Kurds, I would say, are the friendliest people I think I've ever encountered as a group. And we had I wouldn't say good time. We had an interesting time there. Never felt unsafe, but definitely felt different and in an area that was like under pretty tight security. We lived in hotels. We moved 16 times in 6 months. We were happy to be back in the U.S.
Wow.
Yeah, when she had to do her security clearance application for the State Department and list every place she'd lived in the last 2 years, it was like 8 pages total.
Oh, she had to put all those hotel addresses.
Yep.
I actually think that weirdly, you move into Istanbul, leaving Richmond, when the Total Soccer Show was somewhat in its infancy, a couple of years in, right? Might have been the thing that helped us get bigger later on.
Why do you
get
say
more
that?
Committed later on? Because if you'd stayed in the job you had before you left for Istanbul, you might have accidentally stayed in that job a long time and got to a place where salary was really good and maybe you got used to a certain standard of living.
Yeah.
And at the very least, it would have been harder to leave that job.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
I think that's 100%.
I had trouble leaving my job. I had to find some other freelance thing, and it took me a long time to figure that out.
Yeah. And I think it's 100% true. And I guess hopefully my final rambling point on this show is my wife and I have had this conversation before that we probably don't get married if we didn't go abroad together, because that was always like an aspect of what she wanted to do in her life. It was kind of her goal to travel and live abroad and experience different cultures. And I think you're absolutely right that if we had stayed here, she probably would have gotten a job out of college. I would have stayed where I was, maybe worked my way up or been like, middle management, gotten a house, and then that would have kind of been where we went. Not disparaging that, but I don't think that would have worked for us. And I would say then that if you're contemplating making a jump, making a change, it set us back. Like when we moved back, we had lots of friends our age who owned houses and had kids and had stable careers, and we were sort of still figuring stuff out. But I think it helped us grow
put you
a
in
lot.
The gig economy, essentially.
Yeah, it definitely did. But it also helped us. I mean, when you spend... I think the longest time we went without seeing each other was 4 hours in 6 months. Like, we spent a lot of time together. And when you spend that much time with a person, as you and I can attest, it helps bond you and you kind of figure out a lot of stuff. And so I think I would encourage people to always, if you're thinking about doing something, if you're not quite sure and you want to make a jump, make the jump. And the worst that happens is you made a jump.
The worst that happens is you fall. But
there's that,
the worst that happens is never making the jump and then wondering what would have happened if you made the jump.
Yeah.
How about that?
That's a better way to put it. Because sometimes jumps can be bad, I guess.
All right, so I think we should end this focus on ourselves.
Still shorter than I thought it would be, I gotta say.
Here. Yeah, you were worried that we'd go too long.
I was like, this is going to be a 2-hour show. That's going to be terrible.
In the end, we got 23 questions answered, which I think is pretty good going. We do not plan to do this again, at least in the short term, right? If people have more personal questions...
and I hope people are still listening and will continue to listen and aren't like, what a horrible blowhard. I'm done with this.
No, I think...
I'm only going to listen to Daryl's parts from now on.
I mean, that's the correct way to listen to the Total Soccer Show. I think we'll be okay. I think we'll be okay. If you hated us, I guess let us... If you hated it, I guess let us know. Taylor at TotalSoccerShow.com. All right, Taylor. So this will be released while we're on a sort of mini vacation, right? But we'll be back next week on Monday with new Total Soccer Show, probably reviewing El Clasico, and we'll have one eye on MLS playoffs, which will be coming. We'll be paying close attention to those.
That we will, my friend.
Until then, I'm going to say thank you for taking the time to talk to me about yourself today.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you very much for listening, if you did, to this one. We very much appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again next week.